Today our lesson is in Chapter 11, Section 1.5, History Through Objects, Medieval Knights, Suit of Armor, and Weapons. Go ahead, go to our LODA-USD website, and from there Clever, and from Clever launch Cengage, and you need to log into our World History book using your student account and the same password. Go to Unit 5, Chapter 11, Section 1.5, History Through Objects, pages 302 to 303. Just have this page ready and I will show you a presentation from a medieval knight's armor expert. Here it is. Pay attention.
If you go into a medieval battlefield, you're probably planning on surviving the encounter and coming back home afterwards. So what can you do to increase your chances of doing that? What kind of armour can you wear? And how did armour change over time? Let's find out. We've seen how shields have evolved with the corresponding kind of weapon and tactic changes, but how did the actual body protection change over quite a long period in history? Well, the earliest armour must have just been loads and layers of clothes, because quite frankly, if you put on enough padding, and this is what this is a form of padding, you are going to reduce the impact on your body. It's hard to cut through more clothes than fewer. So layers of padding, if that's all you've got. But that doesn't really work very well, particularly against stabbing weapons. And quite frankly, padded armour, whilst useful, better than nothing. If you're wealthy, you want something else. So we move up to mail. Mail is made of links of metal. And those links can be merely butted up, like this reproduction piece, which does provide protection against slashing weapons, very sharp weapons. So particularly in the East, a lot of people had very fine mail, and I think largely to do with razor sharp swords being used against them and a lot of silk. Not particularly protective against stabbing weapons or bludgeoning weapons. There's another type of mail, and this is riveted mail. The links are fixed together, they're overlapped, and a little rivet is put in to fasten them together. This is much heavier than the butted mail and is much more prevalent in Western Europe in particular. And it does provide more protection against stabbing weapons. So a spear, which was a ubiquitous weapon on the battlefield, basically you're going to use it for stabbing. The butted links would part under the right-shaped spear. The riveted links have much more strength, so you've got more chance of surviving a stabbing impact with that. So the padding underneath the mail helps, but as combat became more sophisticated, as people became richer, and as metallurgy changed and plates of steel became available, they started to layer the mail with plates over the top. There's a very interesting period in history where they actually had armoured surcoats, and the problem with an armoured surcoat is the armour's attached to the fancy work on the top. This is my coat of plates. This would go straight over my hauberk. It would get filthy straight away. And basically it's a series of additional plates that go over your torso. And it's riveted directly to my colours. So if I was to go into battle with this, if any of it was to get damaged or covered in blood, probably have to throw this away. Maybe rescue the plates. But it takes an awful lot of effort. So this was a very short-lived type of armour with decoration over the top. And basically, the solution to this was to have a coat of plates that isn't decorated and wear a surcoat over the top. You take your surcoat off and take the plates off separately. So this is kind of an interesting little sort of dead end when it comes to armour. As people started to get more and more weighed down in their armour though, there's a limit to the amount of mail, plates, and layers that you can actually wear and be practical on the battlefield. Yes, knights are starting to get onto horses, so they're not having to walk everywhere, of course, but of course knights did fight on foot as well. There is a balance between being protected from the enemy and actually being able to do any damage or fight for any length of time. And a lot of combat was in hot environments as well. We're talking about the Crusade eras. So people were traveling from cooler climates of Western Europe to the much, much hotter climates. So techniques and technology shifted and changed. And as metallurgy became better, people started to not need the mail underneath. If you've got a really solid breastplate, placard like this, if the metal is good, it's a big, completely encompassing and surrounding shell, you don't really need the mail underneath, and you could probably get away without having it. And it would save an awful lot of weight, because mail is actually quite heavy and hangs awkwardly on your body. It's supported on the shoulders, on the waist, but that's about it. It's surprisingly heavy. Plate, on the other hand, whilst being about as heavy, feels lighter because it supports itself on different parts of the body, and each part is a little bit lighter to move around. It floats on your shoulders, it doesn't drag them down. If you move your shoulders, you're moving the shoulder plates, you're not moving the body as well. So plate armour is more effective at taking impact of all sorts. Obviously you can't cut through it, stabbing through it's very difficult, slashing through it's impossible. You need big two-handed weapons to get through it. So the weapons evolved along with the armour that's protecting from those weapons. So it's absolutely fascinating that the practicalities of wearing too much armour are very evident on the battlefield. People wore the most armour they could afford and manage. And I imagine there was a kind of a balance between the two. The type of helmet you wore, the kind of combat you thought you might engage in would dictate the type of armour that you would wear. And if you survived a battle and you came back and you said to your armourer, I got my knees really badly injured in that last fight, can we do something about protecting my knees? Then the armourer's job was to try and find a solution to it. So people weren't just making stuff up, they were going through practical experiences, going back, talking to the expert engineers of the time, the armourers and the blacksmiths and metallurgists, and saying, make me something that keeps me alive again, please. Because somebody's just invented a heavy crossbow, I don't want to be killed by that, make me heavier plates, please. And then people would say, well, those plates are too heavy, so we've got to lighten them, we need better steel. So the whole thing continues to go. Just as it does today, we have the evolution of fighting methods, fighting techniques, materials and equipment. Armour protects you physically by its existence, but it also protects you because of what it says about you. If you are a wealthy person, you have wealthy looking armour, you may have gold bits on it, and it shows your status. This, coupled with the idea that you could ransom somebody in a medieval battlefield, if you captured them alive, they had to pay you money to be released. So if you were of modest means and you capture somebody wealthy, you got some of their money. That's a huge motivator to keep people alive. There's a story of King David of Scotland. After having lost a battle, he was hiding under a bridge and he was spotted by a squire and his retinue of archers. And they realised there was a fortune waiting for them if they could capture him. They piled in there, probably with their fists and with cudgels, tried to beat him up. And he was hacking back with his warhammer or whatever he had, trying to survive. I imagine the scene where the squire and the archers are all bloody, front teeth missing, these happy grins covered in blood as they realised they were now made men for life. They would share in a king's ransom, literally. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to look in more detail at my 15th century harness that I use on horseback and in foot tournaments all the time. I'm going to get a master armourer here, Graham, and he is going to show us how armour is made, and hopefully I'm going to get a chance to have a go at shaping some plates of steel.
The objective of this lesson is to identify the equipment medieval knights wore and carried into battle. And the chapter's essential question is, how did Europe change during the Middle Ages? Well, obviously a knight's armor is heavy, but armor worn in jousting tournaments was heavier, partly because knights wore it for a limited period of time, not on the battlefield. Because if you will overly protect yourself, it means that you will have to compromise the area of weight. The thicker the armor that you wear, the heavier it wears your body down. Now let's take a look at these equipments to learn more about the suit of armor that a typical knight wear during the Middle Ages. In your book, you can press each object to learn more. A war horse wear an armor too. Well, obviously, because if a horse dies, the knight will be compromised in the battle. Next, let's take a look at this halberd. This weapon consisted of an axe with a spike and hook mounted on a long wooden pole. The axe is designed for hacking and the spike is for the chain mail worn by knights during this time. Next, shields were used as weapons as well as for defense. The decoration on a shield identified the knight. The patterns or designs on a shield represents the family where the knight is from, and it also identify the unique characteristics of a knight who is carrying the shield. Now let's go to the suit of armor. The helmet had air holes and eye slits that provide a very narrow field of vision. Chest armor was often flared at the bottom for greater flexibility. Shoulder armor helped protect the knight's head from sword strikes. The metal glove or gauntlet protected the knight's hand and was flexible enough to allow him to grip his weapon, most of the time the sword or the halberd. Metal shoes protected the knight's feet and were first pieces of knight's armor he put on. These are called sabatons. And of course, finally, the long sword. This deadly double-edged sword could be held in one hand or wielded in two during combat. These are just the standard equipments that a typical knight wear or carry during the Middle Ages. Of course, there are different variations and designs that are not included here in our book. In the past, we had invited experts of medieval knights, armor and equipments and weapons, and let's hope that you will get a chance to listen to this guest speakers, and I'm sure you will be entertained as you learn a lot more about this interesting piece of history during the Middle Ages, specifically in Europe. Go ahead, go back to our Google Classroom and open the Medieval Knights quiz. Don't worry, this is just an easy quiz. This is just identifying and labeling the equipments used by medieval knights, the one that I just showed you a few seconds ago. It is also available in our book in Chapter 11, Section 1.5, History Through Objects, Medieval Knights, pages 302 to 303. Don't forget to complete this form and turn it in because it will be scored as your quiz for today.